people don't know where to start when they're thinking about becoming a business owner. And, if nothing else, franchising, it accelerates that decision-making process. Are there trade-offs, in entering franchise? Absolutely. Like control is, probably the biggest aspect. But for a certain type of entrepreneur, franchise model is, there's a lot of advantages.
The following podcast is brought to you by Thryv. Manage, run, and grow your business all from one dashboard using one login. Small business runs better on Thryv.
Hey, this is Gordon Henry at Whitting on Main Street. And this week, for all of you who've ever thought of running a franchise, we have the leader of the International Franchise Association, Mr. Matt Haller, the president and CEO of the IFA. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, it's great to be here, Gordon. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. So quick background on Matt. Matt has been a key member of the IFA team for 10 years, building extensive relationships with all three segments of the IFA membership: franchisors, franchisees, and suppliers. He became president and CEO of the organization in June 21, so just over 2 years ago. During his tenure, Matt has expanded the association's lobbying, coalition building, grassroots, research, communications capabilities. He took on some of the more difficult challenges, including defending the business model against the joint employer threat. We'll get into that, and significant legislative and regulatory issues at the federal, state, and local levels. During the pandemic, he led the team's focus on helping the franchise business model survive, ensuring the Paycheck Protection Program and other relief efforts included eligibility for franchise businesses, while working with the internal team to innovate how to provide IFA members real value for their membership. What should listeners get out of this episode? Are you interested in owning a franchise? Let Matt tell you why it's a good idea, but also what you need to watch out for. So Matt, welcome to the show. Quick background, how did you get into the world of franchising?
Like a lot of people, there was no intentionality behind it. It just sort of found me at a point in my career where I was actually working in another industry association in the pharmaceutical industry. And really hadn't thought about franchising as a sector of the economy. And there was an opening with the association staff to run communications. And so, that's what brought me into franchising at the association level. Learn on the fly about the industry and what it does, and, how diverse it is in terms of types of businesses that are available, and, the great supplier community that's out there. And so, like I say, it's often franchising sort of finds people at a moment where they're looking to make a change, in how they're, generating wealth for their family. And so my story is not that dissimilar from many others.
So tell us about the IFA. What does the organization do, and how does it help, each of the constituents, the franchisors, franchisees, and suppliers?
Yeah. So our mission is to protect, enhance, and promote franchising. We call it PEP. And what we do, we've been around for 67 years now. We protect franchising through government relations and advocacy. We can talk about some of those issues that we're focused on right now. We enhance franchising through, convening the industry through events, through professional development opportunities, and education, both kind of formal education. We have a certification program, as well as informal education, through our conferences, events, webinars, things like that. And we promote franchising to the general public through our website, through our publications, with different research that we put out through our foundation. We have 2 foundation programs that are quite robust. Our Diversity Institute that helps underrepresented people learn about franchising, gives them tools and resources, as well as our VetFran program focused on getting veterans into the franchise model.
Yeah, and you do a certain amount of, I guess, what we call lobbying, right? So what would your lobbying be about? What would it be for?
Yeah, so either for or against policies that either could potentially make it harder for a franchise owner to be successful, generate revenue, things like that, but also things that are kind of business model issues that could impact labor or brand protection, things like that. So it's the federal level, it's the state level, it's the local level. a lot of work is with regulatory agencies. We get involved in a lot of first-party litigation, challenging laws or regulations that are put forward by governments. We want to make sure that while franchising, does need some amount of regulation to protect brands and to protect consumers, that the heavy hand of government can sometimes go too far. Mm-hmm. And our job is to be in there educating them about the impact of policies that are being considered, and hopefully the outcomes, and we've been fairly successful at ensuring the outcomes enable franchising to continue to thrive.
Got it. So let's turn to why people become franchisees.
Sure.
Much of what we discuss on Winning on Main Street is about independent entrepreneurs, startups particularly in the services space. So why do people become franchisees as opposed to becoming, independent entrepreneurs who might open their own plumbing business or restaurant or what have you? Why the franchise route?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we hear of prospective franchisee that ultimately follows through is people don't know where to start when they're thinking about becoming a business owner, whether they're thinking about starting an independent plumbing business or, going into a franchise. And, if nothing else, franchising, it accelerates that decision-making process and eliminates some of the, I don't know where to start to even do this. Beyond that, you don't need to be a plumbing expert in order to, be a successful franchisee in the plumbing business, right? You're in all likelihood not even engaging in, the service, right? You're involved in, building a team, right? You're involved in, evaluating, your P&L. You're involved in, the community, right? And so, those are some of the things when people think about, I want to be a business owner. Well, are there trade-offs, in entering franchise? Absolutely. Control is, probably the biggest aspect. But for a certain type of entrepreneur, franchise model is, there's a lot of advantages. But as we always say, it comes with some trade-offs.
Right. So I'd like to get into the math, if you will, of being a franchisee. So maybe just walk us through, if I'm thinking for the first time about buying a franchise, what should I be thinking about in terms of cost? What is it going to cost me to get involved? And then what is likely going to be the income stream I would enjoy in the future?
Yeah. So the cost varies, significantly depending on the industry. So you're contemplating. So franchising is used by over 300 different industries. There's really not a franchising industry. It's a business model that's used by, hundreds of industries. So we talked about plumbing, right? That could be, one industry where, there is a, plethora of brands that have, a plumbing franchise. At the low end, in terms of initial, franchise fees, it could be a $10,000 franchise fee, all the way up to, $100,000 or more for something, in the restaurant space or a hotel. Most franchisors today are looking for multi-unit franchisees, or at least the desire to become a multi-unit franchisee. That's where you really get into more economy of scale on the franchisee side. And most franchisors, not all, but most, would prefer to work with, prefer to have fewer overall franchisees within their system. Now, I don't want to paint. It's hard to paint franchising with one brush.
Sure.
But generally speaking, where there's a desire to have franchisees that have the means and the ability to scale. But the initial franchise fee is only one element of the startup cost, right? Mm-hmm. So depending on, again, the industry that you're focused on, you could have, real estate, costs that you need to factor in, or even if it's a mobile franchise, you could have, other costs like buying equipment or trucks or vans. If it's a mobile kind of service business, home services like a, landscaping business or, plumbing business. Yeah, and then there's going to be initial, marketing fees and other aspects to it. Generally speaking, when you look at franchise opportunities that are out there, and franchise.org is a great website. That's our website to look at the IFA membership. There's 1,200 brands that you could look at. We list initial franchise fee, kind of total investment required up front, and then a lot of franchisors will have a sort of net worth requirements that they would evaluate as you get into that potential and investment opportunity. In terms of what, if you're a franchisee, you're obviously going into business to make money. One of the things that we encourage prospective franchisees to look at when they're looking at the franchise disclosure document, which is the legal requirements, the document required that a brand makes available to franchisees, is an item 19 disclosure. So there are 23 items in the franchise disclosure document. Item 19 is what's known as a financial performance representation that a brand is not required to make. This is one of the optional disclosures. A little over 60% of brands make an item 19 disclosure. Within an item 19 disclosure, some will break down their item 19, all the way down to EBITDA. And, that's a really what I would say a really healthy and robust disclosure. Others will, sort of cherry pick data and just say, our highest performing franchisee does X and our lowest performing franchisee does Y. Others will look at, a top quartile, center quartile, that kind of thing. So that's where, having outside counsel that understands franchising and is looking at it from a prospective franchisee's perspective is a really critical aspect if you become truly serious about getting into the business model.
Okay, so just to push down on this a little bit more, so there's the upfront fee, which you said there could be anywhere from 10 to 100, and I would imagine for a McDonald's in the middle of a big city might even be more. And then there's the you start generating the revenue, and most franchisors require you to basically cut them a check off the top for a certain amount, right? Which can be like 7-8%. So that amount goes into your annual spend with the franchisor, which pays you for, I guess, all the systems and brand advertising and so forth, right?
Yeah, so you're talking about the royalty. So I was focused on the upfront costs. There are ongoing costs that are required off your top line sales in most cases. And the royalty could be as little as 3%, or, some brands are, well over 10% of the top line revenue is paid to the franchisor. There are often other fees. Some franchisors bake all their fees into the royalty. Others like to break out marketing fees separately or technology fees separately. There could be, so those are recurring fees. There can be, special assessments that could be made. And these are, disclosures that are also required in that franchise disclosure document. So understanding, the economics of the business and understanding kind of the fee structure is the most critical thing for a prospective franchisee to understand and come in eyes wide open. Also understand that, the economy and consumer trends are going to change, right? We just went through a pandemic. And, a lot of franchisors relaxed royalties, but there was also investments that needed to be made in certain types of industries to better serve customers. And, the flexibility has to exist on the franchise brand side to be able to continue to adapt the system to changing consumer demands. And there has to be the understanding on the franchisee side that, we want our brand to continue to, evolve and innovate, because we have shared interests, right? At the end of the day, the robust franchise system, is not making money solely by selling new territories or locations. They're making money because their franchisees are profitable and they're continuing to generate revenue, into the franchisor off the growth of royalty revenue. We're going to call it royalty self-sufficiency.
So just one more question about sort of the economics, then we can move on. So if I am buying into I have that upfront fee, I have that royalty payment we discussed, and then I'm just trying to think about what do I get for that. So do I pay as the franchisee for all of the materials myself. So whether it's the trucks to go to your house, fix your plumbing, or the burger meat and the potatoes to make the burger and fries, all that stuff is on me. What am I getting for my 8%, my upfront fee? Is it just, maybe you can enumerate? I mean, the brand I know is one big one, so it's a reputation, it's a goodwill. But there's a lot of systems I get. Can you talk to the systems?
Yeah, so the brand is certainly, if you're going to open, Gordon's Burger Joint in Long Island, nobody's ever heard of Gordon, and you might have a great burger, but you have no customer demand at the beginning, right? If you're going to open a McDonald's, you have a built-in, customer base that exists, but you also have, a system that's been perfected. So you have a POS, right? A point of sale, system. In terms of the products that you are required to buy, to make your McDonald's, like every other McDonald's, there's an economy of scale in terms of, meat and pickles and ketchup and, not just the product that you're serving, but also the look and feel of that restaurant or that retail establishment. So, there's going to be a relationship. It's called, our supply chain, right? That the brand is leveraging on behalf of its franchisees for that economy of scale. So back to Gordon, if you're, doing this yourself, you're going to have to go find, somebody to, do your flooring, your vinyl, right? Your drive-through, your, all those elements of the system. The other piece is labor, right? So the brand isn't hiring or setting wages, but in terms of employment, which is one of the biggest challenges in many of our member companies, right? Employees are, desire to work in these types of businesses, and often pay and benefits, there's economy of scales there that we see in our research as well. So, but not every franchisor is created equal. And I think, if you're a prospective franchisee, like the time to be asking these questions, what do I get for my royalty and my other fees, is on the front end. And shop around, right? Compare and contrast. There are, and these things can be negotiated too. Not with every brand. The less mature a franchisor is, you might have more ability to negotiate certain terms on the front end of the franchise agreement. But once you're into that relationship, the contract governs, and typically it's a 10 or longer year contract that you're entering into.
Yeah, super helpful. So moving on from just the economics, as we talk about these different types of franchising, if I'm a first timer thinking about buying a franchise, becoming a franchisee, what are some of the, for lack of a better term, hot industries these days that you would say people are moving into? You got so many different types of industries. You mentioned, restaurants, and there's gyms and workout facilities, there's beauty, there's almost any one that anything that you could do with a franchise, right? What are some of the industries that are sort of most popular right now? Is it something you can put your finger on?
Yeah. So we research this every year. I mean, quick service restaurants continue to be, incredibly popular, and despite a feeling that they're, it's a saturated, there's too many restaurants, too many chains, right? The innovation that's happening there, both in terms of brand and delivery, there's still a lot of demand, both on the consumer side, and a lot of innovation and different types of ethnic cuisine that's entering. So definitely the restaurant industry, and particularly quick service and fast casual, that are doing business without, in many cases, any in-store or physical retail footprint. Like everything's happening through third-party delivery and drive-through, with changing consumer behaviors that were accelerated during COVID. Another category that is very hot right now is pets. If you look at the research trends of pet ownership in this country, a huge increase, and with that comes the need for pet care, and that is a growing category. Another area that is fairly robust right now is education, both childcare as well as after school kind of specialty education. So those are three that are doing, quite well, and there are a lot of options. The last, I guess I'd mention, you touched on it, is health and fitness, and health and beauty. Uh, People are, more focused on mental health as well as, health and fitness than ever before. And while there are a lot of brands out there, and just like every other category, not all created equal. There is a lot of development happening in those categories.
Yeah, terrific. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned education. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had on the show the CEO of a franchise called Class 101, which provides consulting, counseling to people to get them from high school into college. Lots of services they provide, which is a growing franchise. And we've interviewed many on the show. Things you never even thought about. One that I liked was a guy who runs a handyman franchise out of Canada. Yeah. And they now have about 20 locations in Canada, and I think they're moving into the US. And, if you've ever tried to hire a handyman near you, you're like, I could use that, because it's hard to find somebody, especially somebody good at a reasonable price. So I could see that becoming a thing. Yeah, very, very interesting. So with all those great opportunities for people to get into franchising, I'm curious about how many franchises fail, because when you're in the independent small business category, a statistic that's always thrown out is the number of small business failures. Independent businesses fail at something like the rate of 50% in 5 years. I would think that franchises would fail a lot less, because it is a system that's been worked out. There is, a collective mindset. The franchisor has obviously thought this through. Is the success rate much better for the franchisees?
Success is a hard thing to measure, especially in franchising, because when you look at the data, like one way to look at it is renewals. Okay, so franchise terms are generally 10 or more years. Do franchisees renew at the end of their terms? And we see in the data that a firm that we work closely with called Frandata looks at is around 9 out of 10 franchisees renew their terms when they come up for expiration. So that's a positive indicator. The other really I think positive trend, and I touched on it earlier, is the growth in multi-unit, multi-brand ownership. People that succeed in franchising tend to continue to invest both in the same system as well as become diversified across multiple brands and multiple industries. Both of those trends, continue to explode. Do franchisees, fail? Yeah, all the time. But oftentimes, if a franchisee, let's say a single unit person gets into the business for a couple of years and, isn't profitable, isn't happy with the franchisor, maybe they shouldn't have gotten into it. It's not like that location, actually goes away, right? So you might have a franchisee that owns, a restaurant, and they decide to exit the system. Typically they're going to sell that location either back to the franchisor, who's then going to find another franchisee to operate it. The company may operate it for a period of time and then find a new franchisee. So, with all these factors, it's a really hard thing to just say, like independent, the restaurant statistic is, 9 out of 10 restaurants or whatever fail, within the first year. It's virtually impossible to, get a statistic like that for franchising.
Yeah, interesting. Just that you raised an interesting point there. So if I want to sell or get out or sell the franchise back to the franchisor, how does that work? Do I negotiate a price? Is there a preset fee? Is that in the original contract?
There's not typically going to be a preset fee. It's going to be a negotiation, depending on the brand, and, how well the units are performing, right? The franchisor could decide, we can generate a really nice multiple for us here. Or, if it's underperforming, there may be a situation where, you've entered into a 10-year agreement and you have an expectation that you're going to deliver, a certain rate of performance in royalty revenue back to the franchisor over the rest of the term, right? I mean, the franchisor could, require, you to make that payment. Now, that's not exactly what's going to happen every single time. But I think this goes to, clear expectations that each side goes into on the front end of the relationship. But it is a business contract, but there's a relationship element to it as well. And, stuff happens in life, right? You could have, we can all get hit by a truck, right? And so there are, all these things are laid out in the agreement, and are fair questions to be asking, at the front end of the relationship, so that you go in, clear-eyed.
Got it. We just have a few minutes. We're going to take a quick break, be back with Matt Haller, and afterwards I want to hear a little bit more about the role of the IFA. Don't go anywhere.
This episode of Winning on Main Street is brought to you by Thryv, the small business management platform that you and your customers will love, no matter where you are. Thryv helps you run your business, keep organized, and get paid faster, all from one login and dashboard. Thryv makes it easy for customers to find you online, instantly interact, and stay engaged. And with free unlimited support 24/7, there really is no comparison. Go to thryv.com/pod for a quick demo to see everything Thryv can do.
And we're back with Matt Haller, the CEO of the International Franchise Association. Fascinating discussion about the role of franchising, how people can make money if you're interested in becoming a franchisee, where you go for help. So I want to talk a little bit more about your organization, the International Franchise Association. First of all, it has the word international in it. So I guess international franchising is as big internationally as it is in the United States.
Yeah, it's in every developed and developing country. I think there are 70 plus countries that have a franchising community of some sort around the globe. We have international members, so non-US based franchisors who are members of the IFA. Around 70% of our members are doing business outside the United States. Obviously, the most are in Canada and Mexico, but significant presence in Europe and Southeast Asia, South America, and beyond, Australia.
We've been spending all this time talking about small, like independent entrepreneurs versus franchisees. I guess there's a misperception out there that franchisees or franchises are not really small businesses, that they're part of this giant sort of conglomerate, right? Especially the big ones like McDonald's. Is it important to change that narrative? Is that part of what you talk to people in Washington about?
Yeah, it's a constant battle. Franchising, it's not intuitive, right? People, other than people like me that are, paid to do this, right? Don't wake up every day thinking, how am I going to change the perception of franchising? And like, we've perfected this sort of uniformity in franchising that gets delivered every day, whether you're going to a McDonald's or staying at a Hilton Garden Inn, or whatever this product or service may be. But by virtue of that success of the growth of franchising, there's not a human face of local ownership oftentimes, right? When you go to, particularly in this era where, especially in restaurants, you've got, delivery or drive-through, and there's, less and less interaction even with, humans. And so we've lost this local element, and, franchisees have gotten bigger in scale, and, many, as we talked about earlier, own, multiple locations. But at its core, like, franchising is franchisees are still, the business owners, right? Not the brands. And, that is what is unique and will never change about this business model. And when we look at performance of franchisee businesses versus independent businesses, they tend to be more profitable for franchisees. And franchisees also tend to be more diverse, and more women, more minorities, more veterans. So these are the stories that the IFA, and by extension, we like to encourage our members to really be storytellers with one of your greatest assets. Gallup just did research that they do every year longitudinally, and big companies are now some of the most distrusted institutions in America, along with politicians and government and media. But small business owners are the single most trusted voice in America. And we have all these great assets of these franchise owners. And so we need them to be engaged in telling the story of how they got in, what are the risks, what are the opportunities, right? On our government relations and our advocacy, right? They need to be those people delivering those messages directly to policymakers and talking to the public about, public policies that might impact this model. So it is a constant battle. Like there will never be an end of like promoting and educating about franchising. I guess it's good job security for people that work at the IFA. It's not like there's an exit strategy for a trade association that's going to sell to a private equity firm and, have an exit event, right? But it's an important aspect of what we do at the IFA. And I think important for anybody in franchising to, understand that they can play a powerful role in changing that narrative.
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point. If you said to me, who is the face of, being a startup or an independent entrepreneur, I could think of a million. Mark Cuban is sort of associated. The Shark Tank guys, Kevin O'Leary, Elon Musk. Many entrepreneurs you can think of off the bat. Someone said, "Who's the face of franchising?" I'd probably say Ray Kroc, which is like the McDonald's from the '50s. The guy was in the movie. We really maybe need a face of franchising to sort of help give that voice. So that's an interesting point. We just have a minute left. I'm just curious, what have been your biggest challenges since becoming the head of the IFA?
I think the biggest challenge is probably that everyone's busier than ever, and especially in the last 2 years coming out of COVID, and encouraging people to find time to help us do our job, given what we know in terms of the research helps change outcomes most effectively. At the end of the day, people are head down focused on their business, but seeing themselves as part of something bigger and understanding what's at stake in terms of government policies that might be out there that could impact the way that they do business or their ability to monetize their investment. I think that's probably my biggest challenge over the last couple of years.
Yeah, terrific. Well, Matt, my last question to you is, for people who want to find out more about franchising, who want to get involved, who may want to become a franchisee, who want to understand the economics, is the best place to go to the IFA site, and give us that URL again?
Yeah, franchise.org is our site. There's a ton of information that's there in terms of franchise opportunities, franchising education, and definitely encourage that.
Terrific. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show. This has been a great education for me, and I'm sure for our listeners. Great to have you here, and best of luck at the IFA.
Thank you, Gordon. Appreciate it.
And I want to thank our producer, Tim Alleman, and our coordinators, Diet Barnett and Daniel Huddleston. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your colleagues, friends, and family to subscribe. And we'd love it if you'd leave us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate it. It helps us in the rankings. Small business runs better on Thryv. Get a free demo at thryv.com/pod, and check out our new product, the Command Center, which you will find for a free download. Go to thryv.com for more information. Until next time, make it a great week.